I never imagined that wrapping my car would lead to the police at my door and a full-blown HOA showdown that split our entire neighborhood. Would you believe the lengths one power-hungry neighbor went to just to make me remove the custom wrap from my Tesla? Every time I looked at my Tesla, I couldn't help but smile. The custom wrap I'd gotten the week before turned it from standard black into an iridescent blue-purple that shifted color depending on the angle. Some people spend their money on luxury vacations. Me, I'd rather enjoy my hard-earned money every single day. Living in Maplewood Hills, we were expected to keep things tasteful. But nowhere in the HOA rules did it say car wraps were forbidden. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Maya. "Dude, your car looks amazing. How much did that cost?" I was about to reply when I noticed movement across the street. Carla Benson, clipboard in hand, was snapping photos of my driveway. Our eyes met for a split second before she quickly turned away, pretending to check her mailbox. Something in her expression made my stomach tighten. "Great," I muttered. Carla had moved in about 6 months ago and already had quite the reputation. The Andersons had to take down their basketball hoop. The Browns were fined for leaving their trash bins out for 5 hours too long, and poor Mr. Delgado had to repaint his brand-new fence because the color was off-white instead of the approved eggshell per HOA guidelines. I chose to ignore her and headed to work. As a graphic designer, I appreciate good aesthetics, and my car reflected my personality. When I walked into the office, 3 coworkers immediately commented on my ride. If only my neighbors were that excited. But when I got home that evening, I found a piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. My heart sank as I unfolded it. Notice of violation. Your vehicle is in violation of Maplewood Hills, Section 8.3. No unusual modifications permitted to vehicles visible from the street. Please remedy within 48 hours to avoid further action. It wasn't even official HOA letterhead, just a plain piece of printer paper with a cheesy clip art logo. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the recycling bin. If the HOA had a problem, they could contact me officially. That night, I pulled out our community guidelines. Section 8.3 was frustratingly vague, something about vehicles needing to maintain appearances in line with community standards and prohibiting unusual modifications. Nothing said anything specific about wraps. Mrs. Peterson down the street had a bright red Corvette. The Williams family had a custom paint job on their minivan with cartoon portraits of their kids. So why was my car suddenly the problem? At 7:30 p.m., my doorbell rang. Standing on the porch was Carla Benson, wearing a tight, forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi there, neighbor. I noticed you haven't responded to the violation notice." I leaned against the doorframe. "That's because it wasn't an official notice, Carla. If the HOA has concerns, I'll wait to hear from them directly." Her smile faltered. "Well, as the newly appointed neighborhood watch coordinator, it's my responsibility to report violations. Your car wrap is very—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Attention-grabbing. Several neighbors have complained." I asked bluntly. "I'm not at liberty to say," she replied, straightening up. "But the rules clearly state—" "The rules mention unusual modifications," I cut in. "Jackson's lime green Jeep has been here for years without any complaints." Her eyes narrowed. "That was before proper enforcement. Things are changing around here. Maplewood Hills has standards. Your car looks like something out of a street racing movie." I took a slow breath. I appreciate your concern, Carla, but unless I get something official from the HOA board, my car stays just the way it is. We'll see about that, she said, spinning on her heel. The next day, I saw Carla going door to door with what looked like a petition. From my home office window, I watched neighbors accept her papers, though most looked hesitant. Mrs. Rodriguez, who recently had her lawn gome collection flagged by Carla, practically slammed the door in her face. That afternoon, I got an email from our HOA president, Mr. Reynolds. Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that your vehicle may be in violation of Section 8.3 of our community guidelines. While we appreciate personal expression, modifications that draw undue attention may conflict with the neighborhood's aesthetic. Please attend Thursday's emergency board meeting at 7 p.m. in the community center to discuss this matter. My phone rang. It was Jackson from 3 doors down. You getting hassled about your Tesla? How do you know? I asked. Carla's on the warpath. She tried to get me to sign some petition about maintaining visual harmony in the community. I told her I thought your car looked awesome. She didn't like that. He chuckled. Listen, I've dealt with HOA drama before. Document everything. Know your rights. Those guidelines are full of gray areas. That night, I noticed Carla taking more photos of my Tesla. When she noticed me watching through the window, she didn't even try to hide it. Instead, Carla gave me a small wave and a smug, satisfied smirk. Later that night, while scrolling through our community Facebook page, I saw she had posted, "Concerned about declining property values? Join Thursday's meeting to discuss vehicles that don't belong in upscale neighborhoods." Some of the comments were on my side. Let people enjoy their things. Have you seen that neon green Jeep? This is selective enforcement. Focus on real issues like the broken playground equipment. But others agreed with Carla. Our neighborhood is getting tacky. I don't want this turning into a show-off contest. Rules exist for a reason. I decided I wasn't going into Thursday's meeting unprepared, so I spent the next day walking the neighborhood, documenting every vehicle with any kind of modification, custom paint jobs, aftermarket wheels, even bumper stickers. If they wanted to enforce this rule, then they'd need to enforce it equally. On Wednesday, I came home to find a small crowd gathered near my driveway. Carla stood with her arms crossed, talking to a police officer and pointing at my car. My heart pounded as I pulled up beside them. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The officer, his nameplate read Mills, looked a bit uncomfortable. "We received a complaint about an illegal vehicle modification causing a disturbance in the neighborhood." Carla jumped in. "It's violating city codes about reflective surfaces. It's a hazard to drivers." I turned to Officer Mills. "It's just a wrap. There's no illegal reflective material. I've checked. There's nothing in city code that prohibits color-shifting wraps." He nodded, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. "Looking at it, I don't see a violation of the vehicle code. This appears to be more of a neighborhood dispute than a legal issue." Carla's face flushed red. "But what about the HOA rules? Can't you enforce those?" "Ma'am," he said firmly, "HOA disputes are civil matters, not criminal. You'll need to handle this through your association." Officer Mills gave me an apologetic glance before heading back to his cruiser. As he drove away, Carla pointed a finger at me. "This isn't over. Tomorrow night, we'll see who the community supports." She stalked off toward her house, already dialing her phone. My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, walked over from her yard. "That woman has way too much time on her hands," she said, shaking her head. "First my Gomes, now your car. What's next?" I smiled gratefully. "Will you be at the meeting tomorrow?" "Wouldn't miss it," she replied with a wink. "Some of us need to speak up before she turns this place into her personal kingdom." That night, I couldn't sleep. What started as a simple car customization had somehow escalated into a full-blown neighborhood battle. I began to wonder, was the rap really worth all this trouble? But then I remembered, Carla had called the police on me. That unnecessary escalation could have gone sideways fast. No, this wasn't just about a car rap anymore. This was about standing up to someone trying to impose their personal preferences on the entire community through selective enforcement. Tomorrow's meeting wouldn't just decide the fate of my Tesla's look. It would set a precedent for how far one person could go in controlling our neighborhood. The next evening, the community center buzzed with chatter as I walked in for the emergency HOA meeting. Nearly 40 residents had showed up, way more than the usual 10 or 12. Carla sat in the front row, a thick binder on her lap, whispering to two homeowners I recognized as her usual allies. Mr. Reynolds, our HOA president, called the meeting to order. A retired high school principal, he usually ran things fairly, but tonight, beads of sweat already dotted his forehead. He began, avoiding eye contact with both of us. "We have one item on the agenda this evening, a resident complaint regarding vehicle modifications at 247 Maple Drive." Carla's hand shot up immediately. Mr. Reynolds sighed and nodded. She stood, turning to face the crowd rather than the board. "Fellow homeowners, what began as a simple issue has exposed a deeper problem in Maplewood Hills. Standards are slipping." She opened her binder and began passing around laminated photos of my car. "This vehicle violates not just the letter, but the spirit of our community guidelines. It's reflective, it's distracting, and frankly, it looks more at home in a street racing scene than in our family-oriented neighborhood." She pulled out a second set of papers. "I've documented 7 instances where children stopped riding their bikes to gawk at this car. On 3 separate occasions, drivers slowed down considerably when passing it. This isn't just an eyesore, it's a safety concern." Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat. "Thank you, Carla. Would the homeowner like to respond?" I stood up, very aware of the dozens of eyes now focused on me. "First, thank you all for coming tonight. I know we all care about this community." I handed each board member a folder. In it, you'll find 3 things. 1, photos of 17 vehicles in our neighborhood with custom modifications, including paint jobs, aftermarket wheels, and decorative decals. 2, a copy of Section 8.3 highlighted, which mentions unusual modifications but never defines what that means. 3, a letter from Pine Valley Custom Auto, confirming that my wrap uses non-reflective materials and meets all safety standards. I finished. Carla interrupted. "Those other modifications aren't as extreme." Mr. Reynolds held up a hand. "Please wait your turn, Carla." I continued. "If this is truly about neighborhood standards and not personal preference, then we need clear, specific guidelines that are enforced equally. My wrap may be colorful, but it's professionally done, well-maintained, and parked in my driveway, not on the street." Mrs. Rodriguez raised her hand. "May I speak?" Mr. Reynolds nodded, and she stood. "I've lived here for 15 years. This neighborhood used to be about community, not control. Last month, Carla filed a complaint about my garden gnomes. Before that, it was the Garcia's fence. Now it's this car. Where does it end? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Carla's face reddened. The HOA exists to maintain property values, she shot back. Quirky personal touches might seem harmless on their own, but collectively they change the character of a neighborhood. Jackson stood up next. I drive a lime green Jeep with aftermarket wheels. It's been here 5 years without a single complaint. Why is this car suddenly an issue when mine wasn't? Carla fumbled. Well, your vehicle, while bright, is a factory color. This wrap changes depending on the viewing angle. Actually, I cut in, Jeep doesn't make that shade of green. Jackson's is a custom paint job. Mr. Reynolds looked increasingly uncomfortable. Perhaps we should put this to a board vote. Carla jumped in again. Before you vote, there's something else. She pulled out a printed email. I contacted a real estate appraiser who confirmed that non-standard vehicle modifications visible from the street can impact neighboring property values by up to 3%. One of the board members squinted at the paper. This doesn't specifically mention color-shifting car wraps. It's the principle, Carla insisted. First one wrapped car, then another. Before you know it, our distinguished community starts looking like a custom car show. An older man I'd never met raised his hand. I've been quiet until now, but this is getting ridiculous. I moved here from Hillcrest Heights because their HOA got obsessed with petty rules while ignoring real issues. The board meetings turned into personal vendettas. Sound familiar? More residents nodded. The tide was clearly turning. Carla must have felt it too. Her voice became sharper, almost frantic. If we don't enforce our guidelines consistently, they become meaningless. I've already started a petition. Is that why you came to my door? Mrs. Rodriguez snapped. You told me it was about adding more recycling bins. The room erupted in crosstalk. Order, please! Mr. Reynolds banged his gavel repeatedly. This is exactly why emergency meetings should be reserved for actual emergencies. He looked tired. The board will deliberate privately and communicate our decision within 48 hours. Carla wasn't finished. If the board won't enforce the rules, homeowners do have the right to pursue independent action. Section 12.1 allows residents to file civil complaints for persistent violations. The threat hung in the air. Was she seriously threatening to sue me over a car wrap? As the meeting adjourned, people broke into small groups. Some avoided eye contact. Others offered supportive pats on the shoulder. Jackson came over with Mrs. Rodriguez. Well, he said, that went as well as it could have. Carla really overplayed her hand. Mrs. Rodriguez looked uneasy. Don't underestimate her. She's been building a network ever since she moved in. Notice how she always brings cookies to new homeowners. That's not just neighborly, it's strategic. I glanced across the room. Carla was already speaking to 2 board members, her thick binder open between them. What happens if the board rules against me? I asked. Jackson shrugged. Usually, a fine, maybe $50 to $100 per day until you fix it. That's insane, I said, for something that isn't hurting anyone. Welcome to HOA politics, he replied. Mrs. Rodriguez sighed. My sister fought a similar battle over holiday lights, lost, cost her thousands. Walking to my car, I spotted another note tucked under the windshield wiper. But this one wasn't a violation notice. It was handwritten. Beautiful car. Don't let them bully you. A neighbor. The small act of support lifted my spirits. But as I drove home, I saw Carla and 2 others standing in her driveway watching me as I passed. I couldn't help but wonder, what else might she try before the board made its decision? That night, I stayed up late researching HOA law. Most courts gave associations wide discretion in enforcement, but they did require rules to be clear and applied consistently. The vagueness of Section 8.3, unusual modifications, might actually work in my favor. Around midnight, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Board leaning 3-2 against you. Reynolds is sympathetic but worried about precedent. I stared at the screen. Someone was helping me from the inside. I texted back, "Who is this?" No reply. The next morning, I opened my front door and found a certified letter from the HOA board. They had moved faster than expected. My hands trembled slightly as I tore it open, bracing for the worst. Instead, I found a surprise. The board had decided to table. The letter stated that the issue had been tabled pending a full review and clarification of Section 8.3. A special committee would be formed to draft more specific guidelines regarding vehicle appearances with input from the community. Until then, no action would be taken regarding my car. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by suspicion. This didn't feel like a final victory, just a temporary pause. What was Carla planning next? I didn't have to wait long to find out. That afternoon, a white news van pulled into the visitor parking area. Two people stepped out with cameras and microphones. On the side of the van, Channel 7 News, Community Spotlight. From my window, I watched Carla greet them warmly, gesturing toward my house. She'd brought in the media. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I searched every page of the Maplewood Hills HOA bylaws. The clock read 2:38 a.m., but sleep wasn't an option. If I didn't act, those fines could start in less than 48 hours. The more I read, the more confident I became. Carla wasn't enforcing the rules, she was manipulating them. Then I found it. "Gotcha!" I shouted to my empty living room. Section 8.3 included a critical footnote Carla had conveniently ignored. Modifications deemed unusual must demonstrably affect property values or pose safety hazards, as determined by a qualified assessment. No such assessment had been conducted for my car wrap. This wasn't about safety or property value. It was Carla's personal vendetta. I grabbed my phone and texted Jackson. "You up? Need photos of your lime green Jeep ASAP." He'd lived here for years without a single complaint, despite driving one of the most eye-catching cars in the neighborhood. "What's going on?" "Carla again," I replied. "HOA's threatening fines unless I remove my wrap. Need proof they're enforcing rules selectively." He sent a thumbs-up emoji. By sunrise, I had photos from 6 different neighbors documenting selective rule enforcement. Mrs. Thompson's purple front door, violating the neutral colors only policy. The Garcia's oversized water feature. The Patel's unauthorized vegetable garden. Dozens of decorative flags, unapproved lawn ornaments, and modified vehicles. I printed everything, organized it neatly in a binder, and drove to Mr. Reynolds' house before he could leave for work. His eyebrows shot up when he saw me on his doorstep at 7 a.m., coffee mug in hand, still in his bathrobe. "This better be important," he said. "Can I have 5 minutes of your time? It's about the HOA meeting." He sighed, but stepped aside, letting me in. His living room was as meticulously arranged as I'd expected from a lifelong educator and HOA president. "Mr. Reynolds, I've done my homework." I opened the binder and laid out my case. "The wrap on my Tesla doesn't violate any specific rule. Section 8.3 clearly says a qualified assessment must determine whether a modification affects property values or safety, and that hasn't happened." He flipped through the documents, frowning. "You've been thorough, I'll give you that." "That's not all," I said, flipping to the next section. "Here are 16 documented rule violations throughout Maplewood Hills that have gone completely unaddressed." I paused. "If you enforce this rule against me, but ignore these others, that's selective enforcement. It could even be seen as discriminatory." Mr. Reynolds' face fell. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Between us," he said, "Carla is making everyone's life miserable. She's threatened to sue the HOA for negligence if we don't respond to her complaints." So it wasn't about rules, it was about fear. "She's filed 27 complaints in the past 3 months, he added quietly. "Most of the board is afraid to stand up to her because she's married to a lawyer." Suddenly, everything made sense. As I left, I spotted Carla across the street pointing her phone at the Millers' basketball hoop. When she saw me watching, she quickly lowered it and marched toward her next target. I followed from a distance, curious. She knocked on Mrs. Watson's door, an elderly widow who had recently installed a small bird feeder. I couldn't hear their conversation, but it wasn't hard to guess. Carla was pointing aggressively at the feeder, and Mrs. Watson's smile slowly vanished. After Carla left, Mrs. Watson sat on her porch steps, looking completely deflated. That's when it hit me. Carla wasn't just targeting me, she was bullying the entire neighborhood. And bullies only win when people stay silent. I walked up and introduced myself. "I couldn't help noticing Carla pointing at your bird feeder." Mrs. Watson's eyes welled up. "She says it's attracting pests and violates the nuisance clause. My late husband built that feeder. It's one of the last things I have left of him." "Would you be willing to share your story at the next HOA?" I asked gently. "You wouldn't be alone." One by one, I visited every household Carla had harassed. Some neighbors were angry, others were scared, but nearly all were ready to join forces. Jackson helped me set up a group chat so we could coordinate. We called it Neighbors for Sanity. That night, I couldn't sleep again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was strategy, hope. Still, I worried. What if Carla retaliated? What if Mr. Reynolds folded under pressure? What if my neighbors got cold feet? The next morning, I found a formal letter stuck in my door, an official warning from the HOA. The 24-hour countdown had begun. But next to it was a second note, handwritten on a folded index card. It was from Mr. Reynolds.
"I'm trying to buy you time. Don't give up." That was Jackson's message, and it kept me going. I spent the rest of the day gathering more evidence and polishing my presentation. While reviewing city property maps online, I stumbled upon something surprising. Carla's perfectly manicured white picket fence extended 3 feet beyond her property line, clearly violating both HOA rules and city ordinances. Before I could process it all, my phone buzzed again. A text from Jackson. Carla just called the cops on the Rodriguez kids for their lemonade stand. Claimed they were running an unauthorized business. Cops looked embarrassed but shut it down. This was spiraling out of control. "Get video next time," I replied. "Document everything." That afternoon, my doorbell rang. It was Officer Mills again, looking more uncomfortable than during his first visit. "Sorry about this," he said quietly. "Mrs. Winters is claiming your car is causing traffic hazards because people are slowing down to look at it." "Has there been an accident?" I asked. "No." "Any citations issued?" "None." "Then perhaps this isn't a police matter," I said, raising an eyebrow. He gave a reluctant nod. "Between us, we've gotten 7 calls from her this week alone. My sergeant's losing patience." As he left, I noticed Carla watching from her window, phone pressed to her ear. She'd escalated from HOA complaints to weaponizing the police. Tomorrow's meeting couldn't come soon enough. That night, just as I was finalizing my presentation, a notification popped up on my laptop, an email from the Nashville Zoning Department. I hadn't expected such a quick response. Attached were satellite images clearly showing several properties in Maplewood Hills with boundary issues, including Carla's fence, which protruded far beyond her lot. I added this to my growing evidence file, careful not to appear vindictive. This wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness. The real question was, would the community stand up to Carla's intimidation or stay silent? The next evening, 30 minutes before the emergency HOA meeting, the Maplewood Hills Community Center parking lot was overflowing. Neighbors greeted one another with nervous excitement, many meeting for the first time, despite living just doors apart. Mrs. Watson clutched a photo album filled with pictures of her late husband building the now infamous bird feeder. The Rodriguez kids brought a poster board showing their lemonade stand profits had gone to the local animal shelter. "Quite a turnout," Jackson said, helping me carry my materials inside. "Carla just pulled in. She looks confused by all the cars." Inside, the meeting room buzzed with whispered conversations. Board members exchanged uneasy glances as more chairs were brought in. Then Mr. Reynolds approached me, eyes wide with disbelief. "I've never seen this many people at an HOA meeting," he whispered. "What exactly did you do?" "I listened," I said simply. Everyone just needed to know they weren't alone. Carla entered with her husband, a stiff, stern-faced man in a sharp gray suit. Her confident smile faded as she saw the packed room. Clutching her designer handbag, she sat in the front row, refusing to make eye contact. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat. "I'd like to call this emergency meeting to order. Today's agenda concerns the complaint filed regarding the vehicle wrap at 342 Maple Drive. The homeowner has requested an opportunity to present their case before any violation notice is enforced." I walked to the front, took a steadying breath, and began. "Thank you for allowing me to speak. What started as a simple question about my car wrap revealed something much bigger, a pattern that's impacting our entire neighborhood." I paused, looking around the room. The HOA exists to preserve property values and maintain community standards, but it must do so fairly, not based on one person's personal preferences. The room remained silent as I continued, methodically laying out the evidence. photos of other unaddressed modifications throughout the neighborhood. The bylaw language itself, which clearly requires a qualified assessment for any unusual vehicle appearance to be cited. Multiple examples of unequal enforcement across Maplewood Hills. Rules applied unequally aren't rules, I said. They become weapons, and I'm not the only one who's been targeted. I gestured to Mrs. Watson, who stood, hands trembling, and spoke softly. Carla demanded I take down the bird feeder my late husband built. It's one of the last things I have of him. Next came the Rodriguez family, explaining how their kid's lemonade stand was reported to police, even though it only operated on weekends and donated proceeds to the animal shelter. One by one, neighbors stood and shared their stories. As they spoke, Carla's expression shifted from irritation to disbelief to panic. Her cheeks flushed, her posture tightened. When Mr. Martinez described Carla photographing his backyard without permission, Carla suddenly stood up. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I'm protecting our property values while the rest of you ignore the rules you agreed to follow." Her voice quivered with rage. "My husband will be filing a lawsuit against the board if they fail to enforce the covenants." All eyes turned to her husband. He shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable, but said nothing. I stayed calm. "We're not asking to get rid of the rules, Mrs. Winters. We're asking for them to be applied fairly and interpreted reasonably." That's when I handed out copies of the proposal I'd been working on for days. Included were several key reforms. Specific, measurable standards instead of vague terms like unusual or inappropriate. A formal complaint process requiring photographic documentation. A mandatory mediation step before any fines could be imposed. A community-led review committee to ensure consistent enforcement. I continued. "I propose we form a community committee to review current violations, including property boundary encroachments." As I spoke, I briefly displayed the satellite image showing Carla's fence extending beyond her property line, but I didn't single her out by name. Carla's husband leaned over and whispered something in her ear, his face suddenly concerned. She shook her head firmly, lips tight. Mr. Reynolds examined the proposal. "These are thoughtful suggestions," he said, "and they could help prevent future disputes. I move that we vote on forming a committee to review these amendments." Suddenly, Carla's husband stood up. "Before we vote, I'd like to say something." The room quieted. "As an attorney," he began, "I advise the board that selective enforcement of HOA regulations creates potential legal liability. A consistent, clearly defined process is in everyone's best interest." Carla looked at him, stunned. With that single statement, he'd undermined her threats of legal action. When the vote was called, the results were nearly unanimous. Everyone voted in favor, except Carla and her husband. The board also agreed to suspend all pending violation notices until the new guidelines were reviewed and adopted, including the one against my car wrap. As the meeting ended, neighbors lingered, chatting, exchanging phone numbers, and even making plans for a community barbecue. Carla and her husband left quickly, silent, eyes down. I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Officer Mills, this time out of uniform. "Impressive meeting," he said. "I live in the next subdivision over, but I wanted to see how this played out. For what it's worth, our department has implemented a new policy. We now require documentation of actual ordinance violations before responding to HOA-related calls." 2 weeks later, my compromise was complete.
I had my Tesla's wrap toned down to a slightly more subdued shade, still unique but less flashy. The newly formed homeowners committee, once dominated by Carla's allies, now included neighbors from across Maplewood Hills, including Mrs. Watson and Mr. Martinez. Carla's fence quietly moved back within her actual property line. The Rodriguez kids? Their lemonade stand reopened with official weekend permits, even featuring HOA-approved signage. Mrs. Watson's bird feeder? It stayed and was now designated a community wildlife preservation feature. Most surprisingly of all, Carla began attending neighborhood events. At first, she stood off to the side, arms folded, but over time, she started participating in small conversations. At the community barbecue, I even overheard her complimenting Mrs. Watson's lemonade. Then, one evening, as I was rinsing off my still-wrapped Tesla in the driveway, Carla approached, looking human. "Your car actually looks nice with the new shade," she said, each word a struggle. "Robert, my husband, he says I need to learn to pick my battles." I smiled. "Would you like to join the landscaping committee? I hear you have quite an eye for detail." She blinked, surprised by the invitation. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I might have some ideas for the community garden." 6 months later, Maplewood Hills won a citywide Neighborhood Excellence Award for our initiatives in community improvement and inclusive governance. The local news station covered the story. They interviewed several residents, including the Rodriguez kids, Mrs. Watson, and even Carla, who was helping plant flowers in the community garden. When a reporter asked me how all of this started, I looked over at Carla, now laughing with the neighborhood children. "Sometimes," I said, "it just takes one person willing to stand up, not just for themselves, but for everyone. And sometimes the people who seem the most difficult just need to be included the right way." The real victory wasn't keeping my car wrap or rewriting the HOA rules. It was transforming a neighborhood of strangers into a community of friends, people who looked out for one another. And the biggest surprise of all, Carla, once our harshest critic, had become one of our most dedicated volunteers. When she redirected her eye for detail into building community rather than policing it, everything changed. My Tesla still turns heads when I drive through Maplewood Hills, but now it's a symbol of something much bigger than personal expression. It represents how compassion, not confrontation, can reshape more than a situation. It can transform people.